So, welcome everyone. Thank you for waiting patiently. Well,
yes, thank you so much.
Yes, the t-shirts were very important. So, announcements. The elections are coming up in a month from now. They're the last meeting in April, which is April 26th. So those aren't for the chairs. Those are just for the exec position, or exec positions, which is president, vice president, treasurer, and secretary. I highly encourage everyone to come, even if you don't want one of the positions, because it's still important that you vote on who you want to be the president next year. So if you're upset, or any of the other positions, but if you're sad about something, well, if you didn't show up, can't really do anything. So, and again, as per usual, if you ever want to show anything off, you don't have to wait for the showcase, although the showcase is also going to be that week before the elections anyway, so if you can wait till then, we'll have a big showcase. So, all right. So, this is why everyone's here. Marketing and fundraising. Before you make your game, there's some things you got to think about. Are you making a game as a hobby project or more as a business? And the difference between this is, like, hobby project is like, say that you have a full-time job or you're a student, for example. This would be like you're making your game in your free time, maybe on the weekends, maybe an hour a night. You can't really, like, time is only when you have it. Whereas, like, the business, like, you're putting your full effort into that, and you're going to take it a lot more seriously. So this is going to be, maybe you have a team of people, and then you're also going to have, like, a full, like, roadmap maybe, or at least a planned release date, and you're going to want to be on top of things, more like.
It's really a really good idea if you want to get into the business side to start off as a hobbyist and do it for fun and do it in your free time. Because it's a lot harder to go from the business side into the hobbyist side than it is to go from the hobbyist side into the business side. So that's a really important thing to keep in mind when you're getting started on something like that.
Plus, it's just a good way to, like, dip your toes in the water, because if you end up not liking it as a hobbyist, you probably shouldn't do it as a job. Setting yourself up for success. So, first thing you want to do, or thing you will always want to do, is budget your money. Especially after you have at least, like, a prototype, once you actually start having to deal with money. So it's really important to kind of plan out how you're going to make that money in the first place. Crowdfunding is a good way to do it. There's a lot of websites for it, like Patreon and stuff, where you basically just, like, tell people, like, hey, I have this cool idea. I want to make it into a real game. Give me your money, and I'll actually do it. And so there's a lot of commitment that goes in that too, because at the same time, like, you can't just take the money, because they're going to want a result. Like, they're paying for it. They're not just giving you money to give you money. That would be a donation. This is like, you're promising them a game. You got to make the game. Or there's also other things. You can pitch your idea to maybe larger studios or publishers, and they'll look at your idea, and if they think it's a good one, then they'll help you out more or less, and they'll give you money for that. Otherwise, you can always pitch your idea to individuals, maybe smaller businesses, maybe some rich guy you know that has a lot of money. I mean, one of those options. Otherwise, what a lot of hobbyists do, that I've talked to at least, if you, like, save up your money from maybe a different job that you have, you can save a bunch of money, maybe so you have enough. And this really plays into budgeting too, because you got to go a year or so without breaking your budget. Otherwise, you're going to have to stop and go back to a job to make money, because you'll be broke. So that's also an option. And then regardless of what you do, you should try to be keeping a dev blog on a site like maybe YouTube or Twitch or Patreon if you're using Patreon. This is important, one, to keep people updated that you're getting money from, because they want to know that you're actually making progress. And then two, it also helps kind of, like, raise attention, or, like, it's like marketing basically, and all you're doing is talking about what you're doing. So this helps with, like, advertisement and stuff too, because if it's a cool enough idea, people will see it on YouTube or whatever.
All I really have to say is we'll go over this more in crowdfunding, but you got to be careful. As soon as you start accepting money, you're getting really serious into it. And as soon as you go and you get on a site like Kickstarter, for example, you don't have the risk of having to send the money back. Usually when people send you money on Kickstarter, no matter what happens, you usually get to keep the money. But you've now burned that bridge forever because people know that you can't deliver on your promises. So just know, if you do go that route, sure, there are some things that you can get away with, but you're only going to get away with it once. So make sure you keep that in mind.
So, crowdfunding. I don't know who said this, but yeah. But crowdfunding a game is a full-time job, said from some probably smart guy at some point. And this is because once you get into it, you got to really stick with it. There's a lot, especially that first week, month or so that you get into it. You really got to stay on top of things, or people are going to be disappointed. So with that, making a trailer is a big thing. Once you have a prototype, you've got to create a way to basically make an elevator pitch for your game. Trailers are a really good way of doing that because you can kind of cram in a lot of information and show off all the cool things that you want to show off with your game. And then down the road, after you make the trailer, you're going to be constantly wanting to update the backers. And this goes back into keeping a dev blog or at least something so they know what's going on. And if you want to talk.
Yeah, so crowdfunding can be great, but as far as making things reasonable to achieve, that's a really important one to kind of keep an eye out for. Because a lot of people will go and they'll ask for this big lump of money on something like Kickstarter, for example. It's the popular one, right? And they'll say, I need $300,000 to pay a team of artists and get the software we need. And they won't take into account their own living expenses and stuff like that. And then that money's going to fly through because they're basically surviving off of it. And then 2 years down the road instead of 4, they run out of money and they couldn't add all this stuff that they wanted to add. A really famous example would be something like Shovel Knight. Has anybody heard of Shovel Knight before? Great example. So those guys, they worked with a big company named Way Forward, creators of the Shantae series. And they quit the company because they're going to go work on Shovel Knight. And they asked for all this money on Kickstarter, and they got funded way more than they ever asked for. And they promised all these great Kickstarter backing rewards. And then about 2 years into development, they were mortgaging their houses because they didn't have enough money to finish the game up. Now they have released multiple games under the Shovel Knight franchise, as they had promised originally with their Kickstarter backing, but they only were able to achieve that because their game was a success. Had their game not been a success, they would not be in the game development industry right now. So that is a massive gamble. So you got to be really careful, and you got to really think about where your money's going to go, exactly where it's going to go. And you got to over budget because there's going to be times where you're going to use more money than you thought. Something's going to come up in life. You're not going to be, if you're not working a job, you're not going to have things like health insurance and stuff that's going to get provided to you. So it's definitely a really big gamble if you go this route as well. So make sure you keep that in mind when you do all this stuff.
And if you don't know how to budget, hire somebody. Asking for a little bit more or getting a little bit more money just to pay somebody to do that will eventually save you in the long run.
We'll talk about this later, but get an accountant. Yes.
I wanted to ask, what makes a good trailer in your eyes? Because I've seen lots of stuff, stuff that's in the trailer that's not in the main thing, or you'd want to be tempted to put the coolest stuff in your trailer, even though that might be giving away too much. What do you think makes it? What do you think makes a good trailer?
It's a great question.
Yeah. Honestly, so I think the trailer for Inscription is really good. Yeah. So you've played the game, right?
Yeah.
Well,
I recently finished it.
Have you seen the trailer before?
Actually, I did. I bought it based off the trailer. And
yeah. So the trailer only shows a fraction of the game. which is like crazy to think about because you can watch the trailer, see that, and think that's
I
cool,
was told.
and still buy the game. But yeah, trailers, it's an art. I've never made one, so I can't really speak too much. I'm kind of talking out my butt here, but I don't know. I mean, you want to be short and to the point. You don't want to just show gameplay the whole time, but it's almost more of like a movie trailer. Hence why it's a trailer. Because if you think of the typical like iMovie layout that people used to do, where it's like short clip for a few seconds, some text, whatever. Although that's really cliche, it is a really good format to follow because it breaks up your attention so that you don't get bored and you're constantly seeing like new stimulus throughout the trailer. So that just helps keep people excited while they're watching it. Yeah, Jeff?
I was going to say, I don't know if you've seen it, but there's a good Game Maker's Toolkit episode on video game trailers. That's just online. It's like a 12-minute or something, and that goes into more of like the specifics on how you can actually make a good trailer, like all the different details you should be trying to add and not add. But at the end of the day, like if you really want to like market your game, there's like professionals you can hire.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true as well.
That's a great point. Game Maker Toolkit is a great resource if you want to go check them out on YouTube. I watched a GDC talk by a guy who does video game trailers for a living, basically. And he's done a ton of small indie projects. And he has done a talk about like how to make sure your trailer doesn't like lose the viewer while they're watching it, because it's actually extremely easy to like lose track of where the player is and what's going on. And that talk does a great job of like kind of ironing that stuff out and giving some good examples of like how to make sure your camera is centered at all times, how to do some cool dynamic stuff. And speaking of which, there was a VP for the club 2 years ago. He's still working on an independent project. I recommend you guys check it out. It's called Liquid Space. His name is Ben. Ben, if you're watching this on feedback, sorry for calling you out, but it's a cool project. Check it out. There's already a prototype out, or a demo. And he released a trailer for it. And we were talking about it. And I said, it's a little bit hard to follow at times, right? Because he hasn't had experience making trailers before. And I said, I recommend checking out this talk because it talks about like, make sure that your main character, or in his case a spaceship, is always like in the center of the frame, because he would have really cool shots where like there'd be a big boss attacking and the ship would be over on the left side of the screen, and then all of a sudden there'd be a cool shot of him like flying through a gateway on the right side of the screen, and in those few seconds you're looking from like one side of the screen, then you're trying to find where the ship went because there's a quick cut, and it's really hard to kind of think about that when you're kind of watching these quick cut together scenes in a clip. So that's just a really good, I know I'm probably doing it justice, but check out the GDC talk, and then also go check out Ben's Liquid Space. Probably not a great pitch for that, but the game is really cool. I really highly recommend checking it out. It's out on itch right now.
I wrote the music for it.
Oh, did you really?
Cool.
Awesome.
For Ben's spaceship game, right?
Yeah.
I'll have to find a link for that.
Yeah, I'll post it later.
Any more questions? Okay.
All right, marketing. Speaking of which.
All right, so marketing is very important. This is how people find out about your game. Obviously, if you don't market, nothing's gonna happen. You're not gonna make any money. Maybe that's your goal. I don't know. But so this gives your game a better chance of success. And marketing, when I talk about marketing, this is like pretty much advertising, but also a couple other things. So like devlogs that I talked about before, this could be something like posting on social media, maybe like an Instagram account, Facebook, maybe Reddit. It kind of depends. But overall, this will kind of like build up your reputation that you're, if you're consistently working on it, people will see that and make them feel more confident that what they're buying or investing in is more worth their time and money.
We can go on to the next slide.
Do you want to talk?
Sure. So how to market as an indie. These are some, just kind of very basic very simplistic, oversimplistic versions of what you should kind of look out for. But you're not a major AAA company, so don't try to market like one. Don't watch big, massive AAA trailers with tons of funding and professionals. Try to find something that you think would help your game specifically stand out. Do things that don't scale. And what do we mean by that? We mean things that don't build a trailer that you're gonna have on the side of like a truck or have playing in Times Square or something like that. Because like these big companies, they'll build trailers that can be shown in all sorts of different areas, or they'll build like a bunch of different trailers and they'll be showing them in different venues, right? There'll be one that'll pop up while you're scrolling through TikTok. There'll be one that'll pop up while you're on YouTube or something like that. Don't create trailers like those. Create trailers that are, you really get your point across. You can post them in one specific spot that can get a lot of traction, or create a lot of small trailers that you can post everywhere and really help your specific project stand out. And don't try to be like all these other projects. Market differently depending on specific circumstances, right? So if your game has a specific mechanic, like really single that mechanic out, and market really to your target demographic. If you're making a platforming game, don't even bother trying to market to a bunch of people who play third-person shooters, okay? You're going to just be wasting your time, you're going to get lost in the wind, and you're going to lose potentially a bunch of people who really want to play your platforming game, who are into platforming games. So that's really important to kind of keep an eye out for. This kind of quote here is by a guy named Derek Yu. You might be familiar with his games Spelunky and Spelunky 2. And he just has a really good piece of advice. Do you want to just read it off?
Yeah, it says, I'm a bit concerned that newer indie game devs are getting overwhelmed reading about all the small optimizations that they could be making to promote their games. If you can do it all, great, but that's not always worth the added stress. Don't get lost in the weeds.
Yeah, so just do what you can. Really think about your marketing and do the marketing to what you think is going to be best for your project. Don't try to follow what these other people kind of say sometimes, and really think about it from your perspective and your angle.
Kind of a good example of this, or a bad example and a good example. A bad example, in my opinion, if you guys remember from like a few years ago, like Clash of Clans, they made Supercell made like advertisements for during like the Super Bowl, which is like great because that's like huge audience, so they probably did make money off of it in the long run. But that's not really their target audience. That's because it's usually like a lot of older people. But if you think about like mobile games, as annoying as their advertisements are, almost all of the advertisements you see on mobile games are for mobile games because that is their target audience. Like obviously you play mobile games if you're seeing one on a mobile game. So maybe that's not quite the same if you are making a game for PC. It's a little different, but it's the same idea. So, lower levels of experience. If you aren't quite as experienced at this is kind of what you want to look at doing.
It would probably be everybody in this room, by the way.
Yeah. We'll talk about higher experience on the next slide, and that's basically like you've done this for a living, you have a job, or you've worked at a AAA industry or something. But for pretty much everyone here, you really want to stay active on social networks. Stay involved with the community. If you start building up that community, that'll make people want to follow along with the game, maybe stay active, get their friends to buy the game. Maybe they'll probably buy the game. Whereas if you just like post and kind of forget about it, then they'll forget about it, and you're losing buyers at that point.
My question is like, so you can like keep the community by staying active, right? But how do you get it in the first place?
Reddit. Reddit's a great way to start, in my opinion. A lot of people, especially if you post on the indie game development subreddits, you can usually get a good handful of people. And then after then, all it boils down to is just constantly, you have to feed it. It's similar to like a Minecraft server. Usually if you have a small one with like your friends, if you stop playing and you're the one running it, it all just kind of falls apart. Nobody plays anymore. So keeping a community is like the same way. Like if you've got to put a lot of time into it just to make sure it stays up and alive for quite a while until it's big enough that it's self-sustaining. But that's a lot of people. So Yeah, so you also want to make a simple trailer. Maybe like it's ideally you would like to make a trailer once you have all the cool stuff done. But then that's a really long time until that's done. And that's a lot of time that you could show people stuff. So maybe it's a good idea just to make a small trailer, showing off some basic things, so that when you do post on Reddit or social media, you can get some people interested in it. Which is like, even if your game's not complete and you're posting it on like a game development subreddit, people are going to know that you're working on the game, so they're not going to like judge you hardcore for not having stuff completed. Like, they just want to see content. So
we're going to go into it in a little bit, but we're going to talk about like when to market, and that's a big part of it too, right? Knowing when exactly in the game development process you should start marketing. So I'll give you a hint. It's not at the very beginning. It's not at the very end. It's somewhere in between. We'll try to help you find that sweet spot.
it's also a good idea to send bills to influencers. So it's like somebody on Twitch or something. Even if they're smaller and have like a couple, like 100 views or something, like that's still enough that it'll reach out to people. So maybe if you reach out to them by an email or a DM or something and be like, hey, would you mind try playing this game? And if they like it, like, that's basically free advertisement.
You're way better off going around and finding a bunch of people on YouTube that have maybe like a couple thousand followers that play unique games like this, and people follow for it, than you are trying to go and spend 3 weeks trying to get PewDiePie to get your game. Because the truth of the matter is PewDiePie's not going to play your game, all right? He's got a lot on his plate, he's got a lot of things going on. You're better off just finding these people with these devoted followings that really would love to see your stuff and pitching to them, because that's just going to help you out in the long run. You're going to get a lot more done. And a lot of people are going to be like honored that you reached out to this small, content creator, and you're giving the opportunity to play your game early. So that's like a huge thing you can do.
Yeah, believe it or not, you wouldn't be the first person to reach out to PewDiePie about that. So if you have higher levels of experience or resources, so maybe 5-10 years down the road, there's a lot of different things you want to focus on. Number one, you want to focus on like launch timing and wish lists. This means like Steam wish lists in particular, but also I think Apple has wish lists and maybe other websites.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, you want to set a goal for when you're going to be done, so then you can tell people like, hey, I'm going to have this game done by then. Go wish list it, so then when it comes out, like, you can come back to it and buy it, which is like a really good way to almost have, maybe not necessarily like a 1-to-1 ratio of how many people are going to buy your game then, but a good like chunk of them will. So that's really important. You also want to attend online conventions. Or just conventions in general. This is a good way to like reach out to other developers, or maybe just show other people what you've been working on. Get attention that way. You can also, if you have the money for it, you can pay for advertising or marketing management. And maybe you meet somebody at a convention that does this stuff too, where you can pay somebody else to do all your marketing for you, which would be amazing if you can do it. It takes a lot of stress off your shoulders as well. And ultimately, you want to grow larger on social platforms. Like if you have a Discord server, that's another way just to keep growing your community. So whether you have a low or high level experience, the community is kind of a big deal.
All right, so tools for independent developers. So participate in your local game development communities. Understand your audience and your brand, that's huge. And then be easy to find with like a website, social media sites, and some sort of store page. So like your Steam page, for example. So specifically, what do we talk about, or what do we mean when we talk about game development communities and like local game development communities? Well, if you're here right now with us, you're in one. So that's a big first step, right? What we have up here is IGDA, which is in Des Moines. It's like a local game development community for game developers in Iowa. I haven't gone to them personally. I would love to have gone to one of their meetings. We know people who have been graduates from the club who have kind of worked with them before. We've had people come and like watch our YouTube videos and our streams that are a part of that group. So if you're interested, I believe there's like a membership. You can sign up online. You can look at that if you're interested and you want to go out to Des Moines maybe every once in a while and go visit them. But other than that, I mean, just come to the club, go on Discord, find communities, that are with your specific game engines. Go on YouTube, just talk to people about game development. That's really important, and make sure that you're not in like an echo chamber or your own bubble where it's only you talking about this stuff. It's really important to talk about game development, talk about new ideas, and kind of get ideas from your local community around you.
It's always a good idea too to maybe reach out to other people's communities too. There's this YouTuber that I think lives in Britain. Anyways, I joined his Discord server a while back. His name is Bags. I don't know. He does like Unity tutorials. But I got really involved with the community, and I met a lot of people throughout that process that I still talk to in Discord just about general game development stuff. And they followed along with the stuff I've been working on too recently. So that's always an option. So one important thing is to know when you should announce your project. People are greedy, believe it or not. If they see a really easy idea to implement on the internet that you've barely made any progress on, and they think they could do it in a faster time, there is a chance that somebody will steal your idea because you can't really do anything about that. Like it's perfectly legal, although it's not moral. But it's still a possibility. Not saying it's likely, but you want to be careful about it. So it really depends on your game. If you have a really smart design that's really easy to implement, you should probably wait closer until it's more complete. Maybe it's starting to look like an actual game, just so that like nobody else can. There's no way they're going to make that game in a short amount of time. Whereas otherwise, if you have something that like you're basically building your whole your own engine from scratch, like nobody else is really going to do that. As cool as it may look, like they wouldn't have any idea how. So at that point, you could literally just, as soon as you start working on it, and start showing it off because nobody else is going to do it. But you really got to be honest with yourself in this regard because you don't want to misjudge it. And if not, you can always ask other people too what they think.
This slide mainly comes from, we had a guy who came out to talk with the club 2 years ago. He kind of talked about the game industry and his experience in it. He used to be a member of the club, now he works at a big game studio in Des Moines. And he basically told the story of the game Threes, if anybody's heard of that game before. And Threes is like an iPhone app where you kind of slide tiles around. And basically he was publishing like clips of the game online for a long time and kind of like showing his progress on it. And the guy who developed 2048 caught wind of it and saw that he was making this game. And he said, oh, that's a really good idea. So he made 2048. And I think everybody in this room has probably at least heard of 2048 before. So as you can tell, stealing that idea made him a lot of money. And the Threes guy, unfortunately, got kind of tossed under the bus there. So it's really important based off of what you're doing, like we said here, depending on how easy and how simplistic your game is. Make sure you know when to publish your game, or when to start marketing your game. So really easy example is like, let's say you're making some like massive like story-driven like RPG project. All right, you can start marketing that like right off the bat. Obviously, you're not going to tell everybody your entire story because that's going to spoil the game anyway. So if you just start like giving like some good cliffhangers and you show some cool art, what you're working on, you can market that right off the bat. But if you start working on something like an iPhone game or something like that that has a pretty short development period, there's always a chance that somebody's going to have a lot more free time than you because you're probably a college student if you're listening to this, and they're just going to swoop in, they're going to make your game before you can and publish it. So just kind of gauge when to market based off of that. How fast could somebody make this game if they had infinite free time? And then if you can beat them to it, then you can start marketing.
So next up, we're going to be talking about publishers. So why should you, or why would you get a publisher? The main reason is financial support. They will basically listen to your idea, be like, hey, that's pretty cool. We'll give you money for it if you want to keep working on it, and then we'll publish it through us. We'll take a little bit of your money. So it's if you're in need of money, that's a really good way to go, more or less. So they'll also help market your game. So because they you'll probably recognize a lot of these names on here. I think Devolver, I told you they made Inscription, a bunch of other games that I couldn't know because I don't ever look at the publishers.
Enter the Gungeon.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm blanking on them too. Everybody knows probably Devolver.
Yeah.
Right.
And then 505 Games, they made Terraria. Or it didn't make it, but they published it. Some other games. Anyways, because they have a reputation in the community, they could very easily publish or market your game. And one, it'll help you, and then two, it also helps them. So they're also a good resource. So it's almost like a mentor. If you need it, you can always talk to them about stuff. Maybe they know somebody that can help you out. And then there's also, they can help with legal issues. Something happens, they can kind of help back you up. Maybe if you're under legal pressure from something. So, and related to the game.
We have Epic Games logo up here. We don't mean Epic Games the store. We mean Epic Games the publishing branch. All right. So not to be confused with the Epic Games store. All right. So why not to get a publisher? The revenue share is huge. So when you go and you publish a game, everybody's going to want a chunk of that money, right? So you're going to go to Steam, right? Everybody does. You're going to go to Steam. You're going to say, I'm going to sell my game on your platform. Steam goes, okay, we want 33%. So you're like, ooh, that's a lot of money, right? My buddy who's working on the game with me already wants 20, so I'm already going to make less than half. So then you're like, okay, now that I have Steam set up, I got to go to talk to a publisher or something like that. And you talk to the publisher's like, well, I want an additional 20%, but I also want all the money that I'm going to give you back before you make any money. So that's a common theme. So somebody goes to a publisher, they're like, my game could make, $3 million. The publisher says, okay, how much money do you need? All right, I'm gonna need $300,000. The publisher says, okay, here's $300,000. And then the game only sells $100,000. All that $100,000 go to paying off the $300,000 debt that they took out from the publisher. All right, the publisher is not going to just hand over money and then just take a cut of it. They want their money back first and foremost. So you're not going to make a dime until that publisher makes their money back. Usually, you might be able to work something out, but that's usually how it unfortunately works with a lot of publishers. Marketing help may not be what you expected. That's a really big one. So back in the day, when somebody wanted to publish this really ancient technology called a book, right? They would go and they would write a book, and then there's no way they could get this thing that they wrote on this typewriter onto store shelves all over the country. So they'd go to a publisher. The publisher would have a book-like production service that would go and actually print out the books. And then they would also have a marketing team that would go to all the local bookstores and sell the book to the bookstores, all right? You don't need that anymore. You can go to Steam. You can go on YouTube and market your stuff. You can do all this stuff yourself. So you don't technically need a publisher. Why you possibly would need a publisher would be if, let's say, you wanted to sell on a game console, for example. So you often see a lot of indie games in something like Nintendo Direct, right? And the reason they pop up on a Nintendo Direct is because a big company, a big publisher like we talked about before, like Chucklefish, has a good connection with Nintendo. Nintendo knows that Chucklefish games are going to sell. They know that Stardew Valley sold a lot of copies. So whatever Chucklefish shows up with, they're just going to be like, okay, this game's going to sell. We're going to throw it on our, Nintendo Direct. If Bumpkin Game Company shows up, who you've never heard of before, it's like, yeah, we're going to get you on the Nintendo Switch. That's really shady. It's probably not going to happen. All right. If you haven't heard of the publisher before and you've never heard of the games they published, that's a red flag. All right. And all the top publishers are going to be hard to get into, but sometimes it's almost not even worth going with them unless you can get one of the top publishers. Other legalities, obviously, there's a lot of stuff where, like, if you're going to talk to a publisher, you should always have, like, a lawyer with you because they're going to try to do stuff like they're going to try to take your IP. Your intellectual property. They're going to try to take a lot of stuff away from you. because they give you all this money, so they're going to say, like, we now own the game that you made, we own the characters of the game, whatever. Famous story of the game Cave Story, if anybody's heard of it. So Cave Story has been published like 3 times. The first time was freeware, and it still is. You can go find it online. Second time was published by a company for the Wii. And the third time it was published by a company called Nicholas. So Nicholas published Cave Story Plus, and that's available on sites like Steam. And while nobody has been able to confirm this, a lot of people claim that the reason why there hasn't been another Cave Story game is because the publisher Nicholas owns the Cave Story IP, and if Pixel, the guy making Cave Story, isn't working with Nicholas anymore, he can no longer make a Cave Story game. So that's really important to keep an eye out for. Make sure you don't lose your stuff to your publisher if you want to keep working on that project. Yeah, and like I said, publishers are no longer needed. So, is there anything you want to add on that note?
Not really, to be honest.
Publishers can be really good, but make sure you know what you're getting into before you get into that, and try to get some sort of legal advisor before you start talking to them, because they're going to be handing you a lot of paperwork that you're going to know nothing about. All right, just be very careful. Yes.
If I contact publisher to publish my game, so will I going to share my game ownership with the publisher, or I still go to the publisher?
You might. So whenever you go to a publisher, there's not like one set in stone contract you're going to do. They're going to come to you with an idea that they have, right? So they're going to say, we're offering to give you this much money. We're going to get this from you, right? We're going to get ownership of the game. We're going to get something. Usually, they won't get full ownership, but they'll get a small chunk. Like they'll name some sort of percentage of the intellectual property that they own. But it doesn't matter what percentage they own. They're always going to be linked with it, right? So like Stardew Valley, for example, that's always going to be a Chucklefish published game. And if they want to make Stardew Valley 2, they're always going to have to go to Chucklefish and say, I'm going to publish Stardew Valley 2. And they're going to have to make another agreement, either, I'm going to give you a certain amount of money to release it with a different publisher, I'm going to give you a certain amount of money to release it on my own. They're always going to be linked to that publisher. So if the guy makes something completely different, no, but if you want to make a sequel to your game, you want to work with the same characters or anything like that, you have to be careful when you work with a publisher, because that game is now linked usually to that publisher.
You kind of want to think about it like Shark Tank, if you ever watched it. It's really similar, because they're investing in you or your company or both. So they're going to want to own part of it, and they're also going to want all of their money back. So if you watch this show, it's like basically what this is, but not on TV.
Not to turn on your point,
Yeah.
but you mentioned Chucklefish or Stardew Valley.
Yeah.
The dev of that game, though, the only dev of Stardew Valley has actually, it took a while, but he was able to actually revert all of the publishing rights back to himself. So Chucklefish is no longer
The publisher.
associated with Stardew Valley at all.
Right. But we don't know what happened behind the scenes, right?
Yeah.
So there could have been a lot of, I guarantee you, he didn't just walk into Chucklefish and was like, I'm done with you guys, right? That did not.
Could have been a lawsuit or something.
There could have been money. There was a lot, and the dude made a lot off of that game, so it was probably a better move for him to do that. But notice how he went through the process to do that, right? So he obviously regretted getting the Chucklefish publisher, and he turned around and got rid of that. So thank you for pointing that out, Jeff. It is possible, but it's going to be a process. It's going to be a little bit painful.
Lots of money and time. It's better just to avoid it. So.
If you can,
Yeah.
and if you want to.
Next, along those lines, publishing. So before you publish, actually, just a disclaimer first. Although we are talking about this, this isn't like a very step-by-step of what you should be doing. There's probably a lot of other legal things, so it's always good to do your own research too.
We are not legal advisors.
Yeah, no. We're all hobbyists like you guys are. The only difference is that we're the ones talking, I guess. So first thing you want to do is you want to start a company or a studio legally. So this usually means going to some website or maybe a government office or something. Actually, officially starting a company. And this usually like takes a little bit of money too. Sometimes you have to pay fees or other legal things. But this is just to create like a shell so that down the road, if anything happens, like say that somebody sues you because they had a seizure while they were playing your game or something dumb that pops, well, that's not dumb, but something that pops up, then you're going to want to have that shell, because if you get sued directly, like they can take your house, your car, because that's all stuff that you own. Whereas if it's the company, you'll just have to bankrupt the company and that's it. Like you're fine, your house is fine.
And don't think you're exempt because you're living with your family, because then they'll just come and take your family's stuff.
Yeah, if you're legally marked as a dependent, your parents are going to be pissed. So don't do that. And then after that, you also want to get a website and an email address. Sometimes you have to pay for this too, but it's usually not much. It's like a couple dollars a year or something. But this is really good to have a way for customers to contact you, or maybe just if people have a problem with your game. It's really nice just to keep it all separate by session. And then in addition to that, you also want to set up a bank account for the company money. This is one, to keep things separate. And then, well, yeah, that's pretty much the only reason. But you don't want to get it intertwined with your own stuff, just because, like, a business is its own entity. Like, the government sees them also as a person. That's how they view businesses, I guess. So it's, you want to keep that separate just for budgeting purposes and other things. And then always make sure that you have a legal safety net, whatever you remember that.
Oh, just make sure you have stuff in place to protect it legally if possible. You should always keep stuff in mind, and always make sure that you have somebody to talk to legally if you get yourself into hot water.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk more about stuff next slide. So I was a little hesitant to even do this presentation in the first place because I'm actually doing a lot of this stuff legally myself. So I recently started a company, and I've been trying to get some funding for it and stuff like that. And I've been going through a lot of this stuff and thinking a lot about this stuff myself. So I want to make it, again, very clear. I am not a legal advisor, and I'm learning this stuff myself. And I could get a lot of this wrong, but I do want to talk about this stuff if anybody is interested, because it is possible. So if you were to potentially want to do something like this, use a business startup site like Zen Business is a great one. I use them. You basically sit down, you answer a bunch of questions, you check a bunch of stuff, they walk you through it, and then they fork you a bill at the end and you just pay it and you're basically done. It's not cheap though. Let me just say that right now. I'm not going to say how much. It's very dependent on what you're doing, but there's going to be a lump of money up front that you're going to have to pay. Next, you're going to need to set up a company account, like we said before. This is really important because if you're going to have employees or something like that, you need to be able to pay them out of a company account. It's not really legal to pay people out of your own pocket, so it's really important that the cash is flowing through your company itself. And then get an accountant, but don't get an accountant right away. Get an accountant when you're making money, right? When there's money moving through your company, you need an accountant to help you with that stuff. I just wanted to bring up, like, I started the company, I was getting phone calls right away for accountants, and I'm like, guys, I'm not selling anything right now. So there's no money moving around. And they were immediately like, no, you need to hire us right now. They're giving us the whole business pitch. Like, I need to be on the team. I'm going to save you so much money when you start making money. I'm like, listen, I don't have any money to start, like, paying you for all this stuff. So, like, there's no money flowing through the system. I'm not even going to bother with this stuff because it's not important right now. As soon as I start getting to the point where I'm going to start making money, you need an accountant right off the bat. But until you get to that point, they're just going to be hanging out. Because you can have a company and you don't have to pay taxes or anything on it until you start moving money through it. The second you start going into debt or you start going positive in the money account, you're going to need to talk to the government about what the heck you're up to. And an accountant really comes in handy there. Next, also get a lawyer. That's more when you start going public about stuff. More specifically, when you publish, it's really important that you have somebody to talk to. You don't need a whole legal team worth thousands of dollars. Like, have somebody that you can talk to if you get into hot water, right? So if you release the game and it were to hypothetically blow up, you have somebody to go to when somebody tries to come and claim that their house burned down because your game blew a fuse in their system, and some stupid excuse, all right? Because a lot of people don't believe this, but you can lose a lot of money and you can get taken to court for something that's completely like hypothetical, isn't going to stand up in court. They can still take you to court for it. Yeah, they're not going to win anything, but you still got to sit in court, and you're going to waste time and money there anyway. So you need a lawyer, no matter what. People don't believe this. You need a lawyer. And then let's just protect yourself in general. Yes.
So I understand the importance of accountants and lawyers, but I wanted to ask, where does one begin the search for?
Great question. So if you do something like Zen Business, for example, they're going to suggest to you like an accounting company, right? But they aren't going to be the best accounting company. It's going to be like 1-800-accountant or something like that. And they're going to be like a massive accounting corporation who just kind of goes through the motions and does stuff for you. A great way for accountants and lawyers is to just go and ask people you know. There's, maybe you don't know like a rich business person as your next door neighbor, but even at the school, if you know people at the school, you can ask around, and there's a chance that your friend's uncle's dad is an amazing lawyer or something like that. And it's really important to have those sort of connections to business. That's why in business school, like connections are really important, because when you have connections to people like that, they're more inclined to help you out. First of all, they're not some stranger on the phone, and second of all, you have now references for them, right? You're hiring them, so you need to have references. You need to think about it almost like you're hiring somebody on as a part of your team. Make sure that you vet them, make sure that they're a good choice. And if you really had to, you could go online and do some research, but just be careful. And if you can, just talk to people around you. You'd be surprised who you could find just by just talking with people and finding connections.
You can always ask your parents too, or I guess anybody you're really close to that are older, maybe have been through stuff before. So,
an accountant is an accountant. If your neighbor owns a small business down the road, you can get their accountant. The lawyer might be a little bit more complicated because software can be a little messy on the legal side. And that's all I have to say for that.
So also, in case you don't know, here are some different places to publish. Your main ones for computer games are going to be Steam, Epic Game Store, Itch. Itch is really good for indie game developers as well. I don't know what their cut is for like publishing on there, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't cost any money, which is really nice. Whereas like Steam, you got to pump like $100 like deposit fee almost into it that you don't get back until you made a certain amount of money. So it's not free to publish that. Probably same with the Epic Game Store. Congregate, that's a website, right? Yeah. So if you have like a web-based game, you can publish there. Otherwise, like mobile, you got the Google Play Store and the Apple Store. I don't know about Google Play, but I know definitely Apple is the same way as Steam, where you have to pay money to publish an app on there. I think that one though is every year you have to keep it updated. And you can also publish on Patreon.
Patreon's a little bit unique because it's more of like, I have a set of followers, right? So you have a big following, and only the people on Patreon basically get access to stuff, or they get access to stuff early. And Patreon's kind of like a crowdfunding that we talked about before, like Kickstarter, but it's people who come along and basically give you a subscription model to pay for your stuff. One group that's done that and has done really well is called Sock Pop. They're not super popular, not a lot of people know about them, but they're a group of younger guys who basically just get donations to make just really small, short-lived projects, and they've done pretty well off of that.
So, wrap it all up. Our last 2 points. You want to make your game good. Stick out. These are a lot of good examples of indie games that have really done it well. I'm sure you probably recognize almost all of these. If somebody doesn't recognize one, just like say something and I'll say what it is. But it's really important to stick out, especially as a small, little tiny indie developer, because you can't really compete at the same level as AAA. In addition to that, you really want to stand out. because there's a lot of game developers, maybe not at Iowa State, but all over, because people can publish from anywhere. So you want to do something that also makes yourself unique, so that when you're actually doing all this stuff, people see you out of all the fish in the sea and decide to eat you, I guess, or something. I don't know. Whatever a fish does.
Right, stop here for just a second. So this stuff sounds really scary, but it's important to keep in mind. When I came here as a freshman, I met a guy at the club who came up to me and basically was like, hey, I really like the stuff you're working on. You should go and get a Kickstarter and drop out of college and do that full time. And I said, excuse me? Like what? And I was, I'm flattering, sure, but the dude, when I talked to him more, he didn't understand a lot of this stuff, right? He saw the glamour of what indie developers can be, right? The rich, famous guy who made millions of dollars. And he didn't really know about all the process like you have to do behind the scenes. And a lot of people don't. And that's just really what we want to talk about here is that you have to put some time and research into this stuff. It is possible. We've all seen it been done before, all right? But don't get lost and think that it's just all roses. Make sure you know the risks going into it, and you'll be okay. You'll be able to work stuff out. And that's really just what we wanted to make sure with this kind of marketing talk is that you know the risks, you know what you're doing when you're going in, and this isn't obviously enough. Like, don't rewatch this video and be like, I know what I'm doing for my marketing. Go through and kind of use this as somewhere to start and do your own research from there on out. We're going to be around here after this talk. If anybody has any questions on anything, we're going to hang out in this room, just kind of hanging out and having fun for the next hour or so. So feel free to hang out with us. I don't want to wrap it up besides that.
Once again, elections are at the end of the month, or at the end of next month, I guess, technically. April 26th. And then the week prior to that, we also have the spring showcase. So if you have anything you've been working on, keep those 2 dates in mind. I'll post them in the Discord server as well, just so you have all the information. And again, t-shirts are up here. If you haven't grabbed yours, come grab it. But otherwise, go forth, make games, and be awesome.